what was supposed to be the next big thing, but totally flopped. Not entirely relevant, but I like the trend where everybody wanted the smallest cell phone possible. For 20 years cell phones got smaller and smaller, often being the main selling point of the phone. Then all of a sudden you could watch videos on your phone, and almost overnight the trend reversed to larger is better. Soap shoes. These were like normal shoes, but you could grind on rails with them via an indent in the sole. If you heard of these things from somewhere that wasn't Sonic Adventure 2, please tell me where, and please tell me where I can buy a pair. Not sure if this one has totally flopped yet, but I noticed while in Costco the other day that there are no longer any curved TVs. If Costco is no longer carrying them, then I think we can assume they're going the way of the dodo. This one might be a bit obscure just because I've only ever met one other person familiar with it, but Google's Project Terra modular smartphone was looking like it could have been the end-all be-all of smartphones. Based off the phone block's idea of having a Lego-like hot-swappable module phone, the idea was that you could switch out any components of the phone on the fly: camera, fingerprint scanner, even different quality screens. Conceptually, it really looked like it could take over the phone market, as it would lead to people not having to buy whole new phones anymore, but rather replacement or upgraded parts to a phone they already liked, thereby reducing costs and increasing utility. You don't want a phone with 5 cameras that inflate the cost unnecessarily. Just buy one camera module. You want a 1440p Super AMOLED screen to replace your 720p regular screen. Buy one and swap it in. However, like many Google projects, it died off for myriad reasons, and the long-standing era of $1,000 smartphone slabs lived on. That streaming service that lasted like 2 months, quite orky I think, even bad timing aside. A mobile-based streaming service at a time when no one could really leave their house. The marketing was just horrible. I saw ads for it for nearly a week before I realized it was a new video streaming service, and by that point was so annoyed by the ads, untrusting everything I didn't care at all, just out of spite. Also, I mean, it was just YouTube you have to pay for and got worse content. Edit, it was quippy. It made so little impact I couldn't recall at first. Hydrogen cars were a promising new form of motorized vehicle. They were supposed to be incredibly good for the environment, emitting only water as the exhaust. They exist, but not like how some people imagined. I was a pretty big hydrogen car believer at the time. There are some hydrogen stations, but mostly centered around California. Thing is that the hydrogen is quite expensive and not very efficient compared to smaller engines, hybrids, and EVs. The hydrogen is also somewhat inefficient to produce, store, and distribute as well. You can actually get a hydrogen car though. They're out there. The Toyota Mirai is a really good example. Out of all hydrogen cars, that one is definitely most popular. In fact, Toyota pays for $15,000 worth of hydrogen in your first few years of ownership since it's so expensive. This means that for your first 3-ish years of owning one, you might not have to pay a penny in fuel. As you can see, I'm still a hydrogen advocate. Don't expect to be able to take it very far from your nearest hydrogen station though. Edit, a word. Google Wave. It was supposed to replace email with a more collaborative approach. Essentially, it was like a dynamically created discussion board you'd share with select people, and you could have a more readable discussion than one with a bunch of forwards and CCs and the like. I thought it was a good idea, but it flopped big time and Google got rid of it after a few years. The Divergent series. It was supposed to kinda have a Hunger Games concept and all and try to be a replacement. The last 2 movies ended up being so unwatchable. Edit, if anyone is reading this and still gives a shit, I would like to mention another movie adaptation of a novel, The Giver. Book was great, Movie was terrible, it was almost nothing like the book. And if you read the book, then this movie will make you mad. Jonas is supposed to be 11, turning 12 at the ceremony of 12. Instead, they cast a motherfucking 25-year-old to play a 12-year-old, so they bumped up Jonas's age to 16, which was dumb. The movie also got Asher's assignment wrong. It was either his or someone else's. Rosemary didn't even appear in the book. Didn't she apply for release 5 weeks after receiving her assignment and was never seen or heard from again? Rosemary and almost everyone else was supposed to be 12, but they were played by grown-ass adults, so their ages got bumped up, which was dumb. If you're gonna be in charge of adapting a novel into a movie, then please, actually read the book. Don't just skim through it. I'm reading this book again in class, and that means, yep, I'll have to watch this movie again. The US version of Coupling, it was peddled hard by NBC to be the next Friends when that show ended. There was interviews with the caster and they were already musing about the show going into multiple seasons. There was big buzz since it was such a hit in the UK, it lasted 4 episodes. Smart diapers, I'm pretty sure Pampers sells them, but imagine it won't be long before they're discontinued. It's an idea that's been posted on mommy blogs, childcare forums, magazines, news articles. Every so often I'll see a story online while doing some childcare research. I don't know a single parent, nanny, early childhood educator, caregiver that has or wants to use a smart diaper. The only way I could see it being useful is for night or for a special needs child. The idea is still being pushed as a luxury item for millennials, but it's just nonsense. What's even funnier is that the tech is almost backwards. Cloth diapering has become insanely popular. We work, we live. A classic case of something that was a good idea and actually at the right time, but was made to flop by being run into the ground by an unbalanced leader who was right about the ideas being timely and useful, but completely overselling it and taking a bunch of salivating venture capitalists down a primrose path. It also didn't help that so much of it was really a sham and almost a Ponzi scheme. It's not always about being the wrong idea or even the right idea at the wrong time, sometimes it's just led by the wrong person. At the time, video calling with your phone completely flopped because 3G couldn't support it. There was so much advertising about this thing that was meant to be huge, but the tech really didn't work yet. But it did blow up later on with 4G, better phones, Wi-Fi and more public spaces. Star Wars: The Old Republic was supposed to be the World of Warcraft killer. It was honestly a good game, but they botched it on launch by having too many servers, leaving them all feeling vastly underpopulated, making what little endgame content there was worthless since you couldn't find groups to do it with. Lot of responses saying a lot of games market themselves as the WoW killer. This is true, but a lot of the hype wasn't coming from the marketing in this case. It was actually coming from players participating in the beta, and rightfully so because the early game is solid and there was a good population on the beta servers. High frame rate 3D. Peter Jackson pushed so hard for it with the first Hobbit movie, saying it was going to revolutionize the movie experience. Instead, it made the CGI look like video game quality graphics, and it made everyone look like they were moving too fast to be real. Advanced photo system. Meant to mitigate some issues of traditional analog cameras, it had enough problems of its own that it could have likely failed anyway, but starting it at a time when digital cameras already improved sealed its fate. I feel like I need to clarify that I do not think video calling is useless or unpopular. I understand how it has helped out a great deal with medical, legal, educational and other fields. I also understand that the younger generation is a lot more comfortable with casual use of video calls. My point is that since the telephone came into widespread usage, there was this sense that the change to audio and video was inevitable and that it would become the default way to communicate over distance. Until the cordless handset became affordable, you were required to be in a specific location to make or receive a phone call, and their projections of telecommunications developments of the future were predicated on phones being in fixed locations. What I'm saying is that I don't believe video calling will ever supplant the text message as the default way to transmit short informational messages. Video calling may gain popularity for chatting and socializing, but the text is more or less here to stay for short messages. Nobody wants to go through the "Hi, how are you? I'm fine. Did you see that thing?" So, the reason I called is preliminary thing for simple informative statements. If you go all the way back to the 1930s through the 2000s, there was this assumption that the public wanted video calling and wanted it to be the default method of contacting people. This was completely backward from the truth. The overwhelming popularity of SMS text messaging demonstrated that the public wanted less, not more. Not saying that video conferencing doesn't have advantages or uses and isn't popular in those spheres. But the idea of a video call being the default form of contact is something futurists assumed would be reality that never came to be. We definitely have the technology for it. There's just no need to physically lock eyes with someone, or even have to hear them, just to tell them to get milk. The Apple Newton kids, before there were smartphones, there were these things called PDAs or personal digital assistants. Touch screens weren't a thing yet, and this early in the development of computer technology, writing things by hand was still pretty popular. Enter the Apple Newton, a device that could be written on with an electronic pen, and its software would recognize your handwriting and convert it to neatly typed reminders on your calendar, etc. It had two problems. 1. It was exorbitantly expensive, and 2. It often didn't work. If you wrote a word in your horrible cursive, the Newton might interpret it as an entirely different word. So if you wrote bake, it wouldn't come up with something close like fake. It would come up with something entirely different like robe. Not only did it fail, but it failed so spectacularly that it caused other companies to steer entirely clear of the concept of handwriting recognition software. Edit, spelling. Currently relevant to gamers, Balan Wonderland, a cute platform adventure, with the same aesthetic style, and by the creator of Nights into Dreams for the Sega Saturn, that completely bombs in the gameplay department. The reason it fits into this thread though is because the creator, Yuji Naka, was so confident in it that he established a subsidiary of Square, the company, called Balan Company, expecting to turn it into a franchise. I was genuinely hoping it would have been an awesome game, because the concept of monster costume powers is cool and reminds me of the game in New Game Plus, second season of the anime, but every review that's come out has been extremely negative. Edit, Balan Wonderworld, apparently Wonderland sounds much better. I remember being a kid when segways were touted as the next big mode of transportation. They acted like it was going to completely revolutionize the way people get around. Turns out it was just a low-range awkward two-wheeled overpriced toy for the wealthy. Theranos, reading the story of that company and the ideas of its CEO, it's actually kind of sad it all blew up. As a biologist myself, it's pretty easy to see how her idea was both a good and timely one, and one that was never, ever going to work the way she was going about it. She didn't have enough knowledge to get on the right track initially, which is not uncommon. but she refused to learn any more about what she needed to know, no matter how many people were desperately trying to tell her the initial idea was just DOA. She got on the wrong track right away and doubled down every time she hit a problem because of it, and she was enabled by a frenzy of venture capitalists who were obsessed with becoming near-instant multi-billionaires by investing early in the next Google/Facebook/Uber. I think even if she did delve out the project, she was either in too deep with those investors or they wouldn't even let her change tracks. It became like a shared delusion. At the time, video calling with your phone completely flopped because 3G couldn't support it. There was so much advertising about this thing that was meant to be huge, but the tech really didn't work yet. But it did blow up later on with 4G, better phones, Wi-Fi and more public spaces. Star Wars: The Old Republic was supposed to be the World of Warcraft killer. It was honestly a good game, but they botched it on launch by having too many servers, leaving them all feeling vastly underpopulated, making what little endgame content there was worthless since you couldn't find groups to do it with. Lot of responses saying a lot of games market themselves as the WoW killer. This is true, but a lot of the hype wasn't coming from the marketing in this case. It was actually coming from players participating in the beta, and rightfully so, because the early game is solid and there was a good population on the beta servers. High frame rate 3D. Peter Jackson pushed so hard for it with the first Hobbit movie, saying it was going to revolutionize the movie experience. Instead, it made the CGI look like video game quality graphics, and it made everyone look like they were moving too fast to be real. Advanced photo system. Meant to mitigate some issues of traditional analog cameras, it had enough problems of its own that it could have likely failed anyway, but starting it at a time when digital cameras already improved sealed its fate. Google Penis. It was supposed to revolutionize dating. You meet someone online, guy shows his penis to the webcam, and the other person 3D prints that penis and goes to town on themselves, and that way couples can know if they are a good fit before ever hooking up for real. But Google underestimated the number of people with 3D printers. Shame, because it was a genius idea, probably my best. The project failed and I was banned from the campus. Later Google claimed I never even worked there. Second Life. I remember hearing about people holding conferences in it and how it'd be the future of socializing, and now all I hear about is either people surprised it's still going, all the really weird role-playing, cheating scandals, or the people who take it way too seriously and spend so much money shopping for virtual clothes. The Avatar franchise, not the film itself. It sold very well, but it was intended to be the vanguard of this whole enormous franchise that ended up failing to happen. Had things gone according to plan, it would have had multiple sequels by now. That's why Disney snapped up the theme park rights. They expected Avatar to be a much bigger deal than it ended up being. I suspect they bought Star Wars because they needed a big sci-fi franchise and they realized Avatar wasn't going to pan out. Brock Lesnar. In a way, he made his main roster WWE debut in 2002 as the next big thing, and was pushed to the moon, winning the WWE Championship 3 times, but left in 2004 for football and then UFC. He was supposed to be the next star to carry the company for a long time. He was only 25 in 2002, had plenty of time, but just fucking bounced after 2 years. Yes, he came back in 2012 and absolutely wrecked shop since then with multiple world title wins, among other things, but there was an 8-year gap where he could have been doing the wrestling. The flop here isn't Brock, he worked. The flop was setting him up as the next big thing and then losing him. Also, WWF trying to make Lex Luger the next Hulk Hogan in '93 and '94, after Hogan left for WCW. That didn't work. Also the new blood stable and WCW. Basically, in order to build up the next generation and stop relying on older wrestlers like Hogan, Sting, and Flair, WCW turned basically its entire mid-card heel, made them bad guys, to fight them. I'll repeat that, in order to make the new generation popular, WCW made them all villains to fight the older regulars that everyone was tuning in to see. Tablets. They were the tools that would change the way the schools work, and we had a bunch of schools hoarding tablets like crazy, just to see it flop as an educational tool and rise as a cheap babysitter.